Hello out there. This is Greg, and today I want to talk about drums, specifically what separates a good drummer from a bad drummer when it comes to recording. When you think about what makes a drummer good or bad, maybe you're thinking about a good drummer can play way faster, plays cooler beats, or has cooler fills, or has better timing and tempo, and is more in the pocket and with the metronome. That stuff is all really important, but it's not what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about the subtleties that separate an okay drummer from a great drummer when it comes to the recording studio and getting a great recorded performance of the drums. Playing the role of the good drummer will be Matt, who is one of the best drummers I know and also my actual brother. Playing the role of the bad drummer will be myself. I'm not the worst drummer in the world, but I don't practice drums. I don't purport to play drums, and I'm perfect for what I'm trying to show. We're playing pretty basic rock beats, stuff that's really standard, because I think playing something simple will better illustrate what I'm talking about. And also, it's about all that I personally can do on the drums. Matt and me are going to play really simple beats on the exact same drum set, the exact same microphones. Literally, he played it, stood up, and then I played it. So everything besides the drummer is exactly the same. I'm going to show you the difference between his recording and my recording so you can understand how these things can make a real difference. Without further ado, here's the first beat. Here's Matt's version. And here's my version. In a bit, we'll dig into the files in Pro Tools, and I'll show you in detail what the differences are, but just off the bat, there's a major difference in the way the snare drum sounds. Let's hear the second beat. Here's Matt's version. And here's my version. Let's go over to the computer and break down in detail what is making one performance better than the other. Now I'm in the Pro Tools session where I recorded these drums. This is Matt's performance of the first beat, and this is my performance of the first beat. There are 4 tracks. We used a pretty stripped down setup, so 1 kick mic, 1 snare mic, stereo overheads, and 1 room mic. I told you in the intro that I wasn't super concerned with timing as something that is separating good and bad drummers in this context. And just to show you what I mean by that, this was recorded to a metronome. I have this grid turned on to eighth notes. And if we look through Matt's performance, we could see everything is pretty much right on the grid lines. And these weren't edited or quantized. This is just the natural performance. And we'll look at mine. Same thing. There's a little bit more variation in some of these notes, but it's still pretty close. I think it's safe to say that that is not the difference that we're hearing in these two performances. Continuing to look visually, though, let's look at this snare track. Look at how every one of his snare hits is pretty much the same volume. He's hitting really consistently and really solidly. Now look at mine. All over the place. These first two are really soft, then one's really loud, then more soft, then some medium. It's really inconsistent, and we can hear that really obviously if I just play it for you. And then I'll play you his. Every one of his snare hits sounds consistent and hits hard, and mine just don't. That's a big difference between someone who's good at hitting the drums and someone who's just okay. Another thing that this affects is the kind of bleed we can get in the microphones. So I'll play you his and listen to the hi-hat in this snare mic. This is just the snare mic soloed. And now listen to mine. You're hearing a lot more hi-hat in my snare drum mic, which means if I wanted to make my snare drum louder, for instance, to turn up these hits that were too soft because I didn't hit them hard enough, not only am I turning up the snare drum, I'm also turning up the hi-hat, and I might not want to do that in a mixed situation. I'll also show you the room mics. That's the room mic on Matt's performance. Sounds to me like a pretty balanced picture of the kit. Maybe you're standing right next to a drum set in the room, and that's what it sounds like. But now let's listen to mine. You're hearing a lot more cymbal in that room mic. And that means if I want to bring that up in the mix to get more big, roomy drum sounds, I'm also bringing up all this extra cymbal wash that I probably don't actually want. That brings up a really big difference when it comes to an okay drummer and a really good drummer in the studio. A really good drummer is going to be able to control the relative volumes of his cymbals and the actual drums themselves. And what you usually want in a rock recording situation is slightly quieter cymbals and really loud shells. And that gets you in this situation where the close mics on the drum shells give you just that drum shell without a lot of bleed. Whereas in my case, I don't have that kind of touch and control, and the cymbals are just everywhere, which means it's going to be hard for me to get loud drums that punch you in the face like a rock song should, without also bringing up all those cymbals and making it washy and smearing the guitars and the vocals. Now let's look at the second beat. That first beat was a hi-hat beat. This is a ride beat. And if we look at the snare drum just visually again, you can see consistent, loud hits, and look at mine, pitiful. Not only are they inconsistent, they're so much quieter. And what that quietness does is it means that even if we were hitting the cymbals at the same volume, in each individual mic, there's going to be a bigger relative level of cymbals compared to the drums, which makes it harder, like I said with the other beat, to turn that particular drum up in the mix without bringing in other stuff that you don't want. Let's listen to these snare tracks soloed, and you can really hear the difference. Not only is his performance more solid and has better tone, the bleed is practically a non-issue. You might not even have to gate that, and you could get a totally awesome close mic snare sound in a mix. The room mics on this one, this kind of cymbal control becomes even more apparent. Here's his. Sounds nice, sounds like a drum set in the room. Now here's mine. Now even looking at this, you can see the difference. See all this crap in the waveform? That is wash from that ride cymbal. And when I play it, you will definitely hear it. That might as well be a ride cymbal mic because there's so much of that that is almost unusable as a normal room. It's going to be really hard to get nice, big drum room sound out of that without bringing up all this cymbal wash that can ruin a mix. And that is why cymbal control and hitting the drums harder than the cymbals is so important. Let's listen to how that sounds in the whole beat. And mine. And you might even think, yeah, it's a washy cymbal, but I like the way that the crashing ride sounds. It sounds nice and aggressive, and that's cool. And sometimes that's the sound you want. But if you want that, what you're going to have to do is make sure that you're hitting your snare and your shells even harder, so that that ratio in the shell mics of the cymbals to the snares is where it should be, so you can get a nice solid signal and solid tone out of each drum. Because if you end up with something with aggressive washy cymbals but puny sounding snare, it's not going to sound cool and loud like you want. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned something about recording and drumming. Obviously, this is a really basic example, but I hope it's obvious how this could apply to a more fleshed out drum part or a more complicated drum miking setup, stuff like that. Obviously, between different styles, there'll be some variation and there'll be some different priorities. But in general, the idea of controlling the level of the cymbals relative to the level of the drums themselves is a really important concept for getting a clean drum recording. Thanks for watching. See you next time.